The Whispering Shadows. In the quiet town of Ravenswood, nestled deep in the heart of a sprawling forest, there stood an old mansion known as Blackthorn Manor. The house had been abandoned for decades, its windows boarded up, its garden overrun with wild ivy. Locals whispered tales of its haunted halls, where shadows moved without light and whispers echoed through empty rooms. Few dared to approach, let alone enter, for fear of what lay inside. One stormy evening, a group of friends decided to test the legend. Emily, Jake, Laura, and Ethan were thrill-seekers, always chasing the next adrenaline rush. When they heard of Blackthorn Manor, they couldn't resist the challenge. Armed with flashlights and a Ouija board for added drama, they ventured into the forest as the wind howled and rain lashed against their faces. The mansion loomed before them like a sleeping beast, its silhouette illuminated by flashes of lightning. The air grew colder as they approached, and an eerie silence settled around them. Pushing open the creaking front door, they stepped inside, their footsteps echoing on the dusty wooden floors. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and cobwebs hung like curtains in every corner. Exploring the house, they found rooms filled with remnants of a bygone era, dusty furniture, faded photographs, and a grand piano that hadn't been played in decades. But what caught their attention was the library, a vast room lined with shelves of ancient books. In the center of the room stood a table with an open book, its pages filled with cryptic symbols and strange drawings. As they examined the book, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Do you feel that?" Emily asked, her breath visible in the freezing air. Before anyone could respond, a soft whisper broke the silence. It was faint at first, like the rustle of leaves, but it grew louder, forming words they couldn't quite understand. Jake, the skeptic of the group, laughed nervously. "It's just the wind," he said, but his voice wavered. Laura, who had been reading ghost stories her entire life, disagreed. "This place feels wrong," she whispered. Ethan, always the bold one, suggested they use the Ouija board to communicate with whatever was there. Reluctantly, the group agreed and set up the board on the library table. As they placed their hands on the planchette, the room grew unnaturally still. "Is anyone here?" Emily asked hesitantly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the planchette began to move, slowly and deliberately. It spelled out, "Why, yes." The group exchanged uneasy glances. "Who are you?" Laura asked. The planchette moved again, spelling THEWATCHER. The room seemed to darken, the shadows on the walls growing deeper and more pronounced. A low, guttural laugh echoed around them, though there was no one else in sight. "What do you want?" Ethan demanded, trying to keep his voice steady. "Why owe you?" Suddenly, the library door slammed shut with a deafening bang, and the candles they had lit flickered and went out. Panic set in as the whispers grew louder, overlapping into a cacophony of voices. The friends huddled together, their flashlights darting around the room, illuminating shifting shadows that seemed to watch them. Desperate to leave, they pushed against the door, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers turned into screams, and the shadows on the walls began to take shape, figures with hollow eyes and outstretched hands. One by one, the friends felt an icy grip on their shoulders, as though unseen hands were pulling them back. Emily screamed as she was dragged across the room by an invisible force. The others rushed to help, but it was as if she were being pulled into the very walls. "Don't let go," she cried, her voice filled with terror. But in a flash, she was gone, her screams fading into the shadows. The remaining three ran for their lives, finally breaking the door open and stumbling into the stormy night. They didn't stop running until they were far from the mansion, their hearts pounding and their breaths ragged. The next day, they returned with the police, but there was no trace of Emily. The library, where they had seen the shadows and heard the whispers, was empty. The strange book was gone, and the room looked as though no one had set foot in it for years. Riddled with guilt and grief, the friends tried to move on, but they were never the same. Each of them claimed to hear whispers in the night, voices calling their names. Shadows seemed to follow them, dark figures lurking just out of sight. Years later, Blackthorn Manor still stands, its windows dark and uninviting. The locals say that if you listen closely on stormy nights, you can hear Emily's voice calling for help, trapped forever in the house's haunted halls. And those who dare to enter the mansion often claim to feel a cold hand on their shoulder or see a figure watching them from the shadows. Blackthorn Manor remains a mystery, a place where the line between the living and the dead blurs. The story of the friends who entered its cursed halls serves as a chilling reminder. Some doors are better left unopened, and some whispers are better left unheard. But there was no sign of anything outside. Just as she stepped closer to inspect, the lights went out, plunging the house into darkness. In the pitch-black silence, Emma heard faint whispers. They weren't coming from the kitchen, but from somewhere deeper in the house. Clutching her chest to calm her racing heart, she fumbled for the drawer where her dad kept a flashlight. Her shaking hands finally found it, and the beam of light cut through the darkness. She followed the sound of the whispers, which seemed to be coming from her parents' bedroom upstairs. Each step up the staircase felt heavier than the last. The whispers grew louder, though Emma couldn't make out any words. Reaching the bedroom door, she found it slightly ajar. Her flashlight illuminated the room, revealing nothing out of place. The whispers stopped abruptly. She stepped inside, her bare feet sinking into the plush carpet. The room smelled faintly of her mother's perfume, a small comfort amidst the fear. As she turned to leave, the mirror above the dresser caught her eye. Something was off. The reflection showed the room as it was, except for one detail. Emma wasn't alone. Behind her stood the shadowy figure, its hand reaching toward her shoulder. Emma froze in terror as the figure's hand made contact with her reflection, sending a jolt of cold through her entire body. The mirror shattered, the pieces flying across the room. Emma screamed, stumbling backward. The shards of glass on the floor reflected countless pairs of glowing eyes, all fixed on her. She bolted out of the room, running down the stairs and out of the house. The cold night air hit her like a slap, but she didn't stop running until she reached the neighbor's house. The neighbors found Emma trembling on their porch, unable to speak. When the police arrived, they searched the house but found no sign of an intruder. The broken mirror was the only evidence of something amiss. Emma never returned to that house, and her parents sold it shortly after. But the new owners didn't stay long either. Rumors spread about strange occurrences, and the house was eventually abandoned. Years later, urban explorers ventured into the now dilapidated house. They discovered Emma's old bedroom, untouched except for one thing, the TV in the corner, which had been plugged back in. It displayed nothing but static, but if you stared long enough, you might see the figure. And if you did, it would see you too.